They dropped the big one on us today. The Dynasty Deep Dive for College Football 26 is here, and it looks phenomenal. I'm so excited with what they showed us in that video and the blog. And I'm going to tell you today the 9 ways that the deep dive affects you. The first big one is in the coaching realm. And it's just a quality of life thing. The amount of customization that you get as a head coach was really lacking in College Football 25, but not anymore. When you look at the different clothing you can wear, when you look at the stances and demeanor that they allow you to have on the sideline, you really have full control over your coach, his backstory, and the style of coaching that he has. They also fixed the job offers, which was huge because the job offers in College Football 25 made absolutely no sense. So they fixed that so that way you can actually climb the ladder from offensive coordinator or defensive coordinator to head coach at a smaller group of 5 school to then being at a powerhouse. So it makes a lot more sense. And I think it's going to be a lot of fun to actually progress that way. And the other big one in the coaching realm was the progression. So it's a level 100 cap instead of a 50, which allows for a lot more growth, but it's not so, immediate. You will have to work over the course of the 30-year dynasty in order to see yourself reach those high levels. There are also level unlock tiers for certain archetypes, and it's especially important at the beginning when you pick what your coach is. If you're a recruiter, you can't unlock anything else until you're a level 10, which means that at minimum, you'll have to go through at least your first or second season before you start branching out into motivator or tactician. So it makes that first decision so much more important than it was in College Football 25 because you could have whatever you wanted. It unlocked it with just 10 points. So you could initially start as a recruiter and then unlock motivator if you wanted to. Not anymore. You're actually going to have to put points into that first one. So it's going to make it matter that much more. So you really have to think about what you want as a head coach. That momentum progression. So with that level 100 cap, it stays the same at the beginning. So you still see that early growth, but it's that gradual growth as you start to get up there in years in the dynasty. Because there are 100 levels, you're not going to see that instantaneous impact like I said earlier. You're really going to have to work for it, which is, in my opinion, an added, a great addition because it allows for, more consistent growth because you really have to prove yourself on the field if you want to reach those levels. In the blog, they also mentioned that tactician allows for a higher ceiling but a lower floor, and the recruiter and motivator are safer but not as rewarding. So that's something to keep in mind when you first decide which area you want to go. I know some people, they always go recruiter just because they want the best chance at getting the best players. Some like to go tactician just because it's that on-field boost when you're actually playing the games. And so there's another added element to that you're going to have to take into account when you're picking. Now we're going to get into the transfer portal / recruiting / team building aspect. Probably the biggest part of the entire blog and the biggest change from what we saw in College Football 25. So the first one is going to be transfer portal customization, and it's going to be a consistent pool of 2,000 players every single year. Now you can have more or less depending on what you do with the customization, which is awesome, but you're going to have that baseline of 2,000, which is really what it's like in real life. And that's really what we're going for in Dynasty mode, is to get that realism where you're not just able to stack talent. Those guys, and we're going to talk about it with the deal breakers, but those guys who you recruited, last year that are still stuck behind your other players that you recruited in past seasons, they might leave because of those deal breakers, and you're going to see more of that happen, and there's going to be a better pool of players within the transfer portal because of that. So you can also set max transfers from single teams from 0 to 30. So if you only want 15 guys allowed per team per season, so you don't see a massive mass exodus, you can set it at 15. You can set it at 0 so that you don't have any players transfer. If that's how you want to play it, go ahead. You can set it at 30 so you can see an entire team leave and you're going to replace a third of your roster. That would be a fun series ideas, have that up at 30 and see how many players are leaving every single season because you only have so many persuasion chances to keep guys around. You can also set your transfer probability for both the user and the CPU, which is just huge for quality of life purposes. If you want your team to have a harder time retaining talent, but you want the CPU to do better at retaining talent, just so it balances the playing fields between you and the CPU, this is another option for you. It just gives you that control over what you want your dynasty experience to look like, which I'm always an advocate of. I think it's exactly what we need in this space, is that customizability to get exactly what you want to do for dynasty. So now I'm talking about the dynamic deal breakers. So as players get better, as their overall increases, as you start to win more, their deal breakers are going to evolve. And especially once they get into their junior, senior year, when they want to play more, if they're not playing a ton, playing time is going to start to be a factor that they might transfer because of. So this is forcing you to always be on top of your game, or you're going to risk losing your star player. This is something that I love in terms of the roster management style and side of the game that I didn't think even NCAA 14 did a great job of, and really not in college football 25. It felt like you could just stack as much talent as you wanted to without the risk of losing it. Now, you're not going to be able to do that. You're going to have to consistently win, but you're also going to have to make sure that all of your guys are getting on the field enough to make sure they stay. You got to feed a lot of mouths, right? You only have one football, but you got to make sure a lot of guys are happy. And that's the exact type of stuff real coaches have to deal with. And sometimes you got to be okay saying goodbye to one of those players. But that's what I love about why they've added it into this game, is because it's realistic. It brings actual football roster management into the fold, which I didn't think we had that exact replica of in the game in 25. Now, the school grades, which you use to recruit and retain players, are going to get stricter. So now, instead of having a certain amount of teams in A, B, C, and D, and then as you run down the list of the 134 teams, it got lower. Now, most teams are going to be between C and D, right around average, right? Because you're going to have, in that bell curve sense, you're going to have more average teams than you're going to have elite and bad teams, right? So it makes a lot of sense from that realm, but it also makes sure that those bigger programs have that built-in advantage of those. Like when you're Stanford and you have that A+ academic prestige, like I talked about in my teams to use video for your dynasty, it makes it so that A+ academic prestige actually matters a lot more than it would have otherwise. Like you would have to compete against teams that are B- that are not actually B-. Instead, they're like C-. And so that's going to factor in more and be a lot more realistic for those top tier programs in those specific categories, where it's actually going to matter, and you're going to be able to hone in on those points to get your recruits to commit. It also makes it a lot harder to maintain. In the blog, it looked like they showed DeCorian Moore, his deal breaker was athletic facilities, and it went up to an A-. And so if there's only a specific, limited slots in that A, to A- range, you're going to have to ensure that you continue to win so that you don't dip below that, because otherwise he's going to transfer and he's going to go to a place that does have it. So it just makes it that much tougher as well to stay in that upper echelon of teams. So what we're looking for is that challenge. The big one that I think is going to benefit the community the most is the proximity to home visits. I almost never used visits because they were always 40 points. There was uniformity across the board where it didn't matter where the player was from, it was going to cost you 40 points, and it just didn't seem worth it for me. Now, that's not the case. You can have trips that cost as little as 10 points because of their proximity to your campus, which I think is a massive win. Not only because it is more realistic, it just costs less money for those players, for you to get those players that are local than it does for the ones across the country, but it allows those smaller schools to be able to actually get guys in on visits, because you just didn't have the recruiting hours, and it didn't make sense value-wise, the trade-off that you had to make for you're going after one of these 4-stars that you're just tooth and nail trying to claw into the deficit that you're in or maintain. You couldn't spend 40 points on somebody, on somebody's visit. Now, if it's just 10, you can start to manage that a little bit better. So it's a week-to-week, thing where you can manage it a lot more easily if you're at a smaller school, but it still allows those big schools to have that advantage in terms of national recruiting. So I think they really found the happy medium there, and I think that's a really good job of getting the best of both worlds, where local talent, you can still recruit at a high level, but it also makes sure that national recruiting really is for the bigger brands. The scouting attributes are going to reveal in the same way for each position. So if you're at a wide receiver, all of the wide receivers that you scout will reveal those attributes in the same way. Different positions will have different reveals, but that singular position will always reveal the same, which makes it so much easier to compare different players at the same position. Because in 25, it felt like, okay, I know that this guy has got decent speed. He's got, decent short route running. This guy's got decent catching, and he's got, good long route running. But that was all you knew about those two players. How are you supposed to compare them with just that, that range that you didn't even know the number of? It was just on the bar. It was like a guess. Here is roughly where you're going to be, but you didn't even have a number range to really go off of. So you're just guessing. Now you get rid of that, which I love. So if you want to just scout a guy once or twice to see where he lines up against other players on your board, you can do that. And you won't have to use all of your recruiting points in order to do so. So it allows you to be a lot more savvy with your points too, which is something that I think that you didn't really have in College Football 25. You just had to use the points in the same exact way every single time. You don't necessarily have to with those two additions. The mind reader trait will give you dev traits at scouting. Now, this is going to probably be the most important recruiting tool you have, just because literally having that development trait off of rip is going to be so important in maintaining your dynasty. You're going to have to work to get there, so it's not going to be something that you use initially in the dynasty just because you're not going to have the level it needs to unlock it. You're not going to have achieved those things that you need to do to unlock it. But once you do, that is going to help you maintain your dynasty that you've already created, because those dev traits are going to be super important, as we'll talk about in a little bit. But you want to make sure that you're getting guys that are going to benefit you in the long run with those high dev traits. So that's going to be huge. The recruiting battles being a thing in 26 is awesome. It makes it more realistic in recruiting because you'll actually get down to a point where we see it all the time with real recruits. Like it's a 3-team race or it's a 2-team race as we get to, get closer to commitment day. And there was always this weird thing that happened in College Football 25 where you would be recruiting a guy and then all of a sudden this team would come out of nowhere and you would get to a point where, okay, they've got a visit in a couple of weeks with the other school. I feel good about my spot right now. And then all of a sudden, before that visit even happens, they commit to that school and you have no idea why. This gives you a little bit more of a chance to stave off that opposition, or if you're the team that's coming from behind, it allows you to flip the recruit, in a little bit more realistic manner rather than, hey, I've just got the recruiting momentum, I'm going to pass this person and get them. It's going to also help you better understand why you lost that recruit. If you're that team that is like, where did this other team come from? I thought we were in a really good spot for him. So it'll make more sense there. It's going to give you a little bit of an extension, not a super big one, but it'll give you enough to make that final push, essentially. Figuring out those deal breakers. So we talked about the dynamic ones, but figuring out those initial deal breakers are going to be more challenging. So every player now in the recruiting database has their own deal breaker. Now, whether that's, super important or not is different for every recruit, but every player has one. To figure out where those second and third ones come in, you're going to have to do a lot of recruiting on that player. That'll gradually show up, and there's a lot of overlap between positions and whatnot, so you can't figure out right away whether or not that's going to be the pitch. Because in College Football 25, it was like, okay, this is going to be the pitch based off of this current deal breaker and what I see on the board right now. It's going to be a lot tougher for you in 26 to be able to do that. They explain sway a lot better and actually have graphics on the screen in order to show how that's going to happen in College Football 26, which is huge. Sway was always one of those things where I get asked how it was used, and I'm like, I don't really even know myself. Like, I kind of understood it, but it didn't make a ton of sense. But sway will be used to make your pitch much better into what you're trying to accomplish with this recruit when that initial pitch that they want isn't really working for you, and you have one that you feel will be a better fit, and it'll show you how effective it'll be. It's not a for sure chance that it's going to work, which I love. I always love playing those odds games and not giving a guarantee. So I think that's a nice improvement on the sway as well. Talking about dev traits again, they actually matter for offseason training. Higher dev traits mean more of a chance for a big offseason jump. It's still not a guarantee. Like I said, I love that. But I love the fact that those superstar players will actually have a chance to see more of a jump in the offseason than an impact would, because they're a better player, right? There's more potential there. So I love that. Athletic facilities matter for offseason training, and this is probably the biggest change that we're going to see in terms of that offseason training's result page. So the bigger programs, they just naturally have better weight rooms, which translates to better offseason program training. And so the game now reflects this. So if you see a Michigan who has one of the best offseason programs in the country because their strength department and facility is so good, you're going to see those players have a more consistent boost in the offseason than you would at like a FIU where the training facility is nowhere near that kind of level, which again, realism is phenomenal for the game in that purpose. And I love that specific my school grade is going to be so important to keep track of. And when you start out those low schools, you're just not going to see that same offseason boost that you would see at one of those bigger schools. Another thing that they added that I really loved was 2 attributes to unlock specific abilities. So there's now 2 thresholds. So specifically for the shifty one, there is, I believe it's acceleration and change of direction. I love the fact that they added it too, because ability like shifty is so overpowered if the right person has it, that it made it nearly impossible to stop, whereas now it's going to be much more rare to see across the board. If you want to get that platinum shifty, it's got to be like 97 acceleration and 96 change of direction, or it was 97 agility and 96 change of direction. So you get that, and it starts to become more rare, but it makes those players that actually have it feel more special, rather than, hey, this player's got it, and then a year later, hey, now this player's got it on my team. So it really makes those players feel like they are, a once in a generation for that school type player. Dev trait progression is in the game, so it's not guaranteed to get dev trait progression, but if you play well during the season, there is a chance that you will see your players increase their dev trait. The better the current dev trait is, the less likely it is that you will see an upgrade. But if you're going from normal to impact, there is a much greater chance that you will see that jump happen than from star to superstar or star to elite. So I like that. It really separates the top tier guys in terms of development from those second and third tier guys, but it also allows you to have potential to get those jumps, because my biggest pet peeve with 25 was that your guys could play insanely well and they would see literally no result from it. There would be no, I'm okay with no offseason boost, but the fact that there was there wasn't even a development progression was, in my opinion, kind of crazy. Just because if a player does play well like that, they're going to be a better player in the future. At least development wise, it might not show on the stat sheet, but there will be better developmental progress after a season that is, statistically significant. Quality of life thing for training results, you will now see visual aids of increase or decrease in certain, position groups. So depending on the ability and the trait or the overall, you will see how many points they increased during that offseason training, which is something that I desperately wanted for this game, because I just straight up never remembered where a guy was at in College Football 25 or what attributes were where. And I wasn't going to take the time to take pictures and record all that stuff just so I could know where they jumped up. This is just something that is going to make life so much easier in the offseason, and everybody wanted it. So big win for EA there. Position changes did get nerfed, so it won't affect development traits, but it will affect abilities and physical traits. So you won't be able to seamlessly transition from position to position. There will be some learning curves there. Depending on what position you're moving from and to, there will be more learning curves. So if you're moving, the example they used was if you're moving a running back to a wide receiver position, there's going to be less of a learning curve there than if you were moving that same running back to offensive line, which makes sense, right? The realism there, it checks out. So good idea there. We'll see how it works in practice, but I think they made the right move there. Wear and tear is another big one that we're going to have to keep an eye out on. So there's season-long and career health now, which I love, because it's going to make you actually focus on usage of all of your players. You're not just going to be able to run guys into the ground anymore. So I do love that. It's going to make you be, again, roster management-wise, you're going to have to be on top of how much you're using your guys throughout the entirety of the season to ensure you get the most out of them in their career. If you kill a guy during his junior year, he might not be able to play the entirety of his senior season. And so that's something that you really have to focus on when you get towards the end of the season. Do you really make that final push and maybe have a couple of those guys not be fully healthy when the next season starts, or have a smaller pool from next year? Or do you kind of rein it back and feel like you don't have it in the tank for the team so that they can be at a much healthier level next year when you try to go for it all? So again, it's gonna have to be some roster management stuff there that you think about on top of just your normal stuff in terms of recruiting, and that's something that I'm a big fan of. Auto subs are going to have wear and tear thresholds, which I absolutely love. If you want to focus on guys getting, good rotation, especially early in the season, so that way when you're playing those out of conference games, you're not getting banged up. You can move that auto sub on that wear and tear slider up so that way your players are consistently rotating. As you get later in the season and it becomes, go big or go home time, then you need to put it on that grind, fight through the pain. You're going to see a lot less rotation than you would if it was a regular season early, non-conference game. Again, it's just the fact that you can customize that, and it's another roster management thing that allows you to play the way that you want to play. I think it's phenomenal. And there's also customizable wear and tear based on type of contact. So if you want those big hits to really take a toll on players, you can make that the case. Or if you want to just bump all the sliders down a peg so that way wear and tear isn't completely killing your players, you can do that all. The customizability is phenomenal, and I think they did a really good job in Dynasty this year, making it so that you can have your own experience that is completely tailor-made to what you want in your Dynasty. I think it needed to be improved upon, and based off what we've seen here, they have. Now, we'll see how it actually works in practice, but I'm very much liking what I'm seeing so far from the blog. The history track is another big one. They showed the trophy room. I'm super pumped about that. It's even going to be more in-depth than I thought it was going to be. So you're going to be able to see, if you're in a national championship game or you played in a bowl game, you're going to be able to see the score from that game and the losing team. You're also going to be able to see your record, their record, who the coach was that you played against. There's going to be rivalries, bowl games, conference championships, individual awards. You're going to be able to track all of that. And each specific dynasty that you start is going to have its own specific tab for all of those awards. So you'll be able to keep track of those specific ones as well as where they rank in terms of your entire profile, which I think is the coolest thing, because I was worried because they did this in NCAA 14 where you couldn't filter by dynasty. It was just, here are all the trophies that you've won. This is awesome that you're able to filter it by specific dynasty. Defensive award logic is going to be much better. Your defenders won't be able to win every single award because they had 200 tackles in a season. That was super annoying. It's going to be a lot more balanced now. All of the previous national championships and conference championship winners are going to have their own tab. And so as you continue to grow and win national championships and conference championships, you'll be able to go back and see all of the previous winners as well as from conferences that are disbanded. So that is another very fun thing that I think is, just for the college football fan to go back and see who won what year. Like, say you want to go back to 1945, see who won the national championship then, you'll be able to. And I think that's a cool addition as well that, again, I wasn't asking for, but the fact that they did it shows that they're even one step ahead, because, some point down the line, people are going to be like, oh, why can't we get all the previous ones as well? They did it before we could even ask. Tiebreaker logic is much better, so it goes head-to-head, common opponent, college football ranking. This is for conference tiebreakers. If you want to get in the conference championship game in college football 25, it felt like there was really no rhyme or reason for who got in, but now there is, and they've explained it out. They've laid it out for us. They even had a situation where they explained the scenario. So they did a really good job of making sure that the tiebreakers actually exist and make sense in this game. There's more detailed box scores, which I'm a huge fan of. The yards per play is such a win for me. That was a big one that I noticed. It will allow you to better compare offensive and defensive statistics, just because yards per game, allowed yards per game for, is so dependent on the tempo of the game, where if you have an up-tempo team, they're going to naturally have more yards because they run more plays. But if you're one of those slow, methodical teams that just doesn't play quickly and eats a lot of play clock, you will be able to compare how well that your offense's efficiency compares to some of those better offenses just because they had the more total yards. New archetypes and positions. So you got gadget players on offense, nose tackle for three-man fronts, Sam, Will, and Mike linebackers. So that's huge. The position for gadget players is phenomenal, because I always had these fast, agile guys that really didn't do much else well. And other than being just a strict deep threat, I was like, how am I supposed to incorporate this player into the offense? having this gadget position will allow me to, and everybody else, to have a better idea of what to do with those players. For nose tackle and the linebackers, this is going to allow for better defensive alignment so that way you actually have your will linebacker playing on the weak side of the formation rather than just your left outside linebacker always playing on the left side of the formation, even though he's your slower linebacker and you really don't want him to the field side. You want him to the boundary side. So that's going to be huge. It's going to allow you to match up a lot better with offenses. That little thing is going to make those offensive and defensive matchups so much better for the defensive player just because you won't have those mismatches in space that you just wanted to avoid in the first place. So I love that. 7 different wide receiver archetypes, so you'll be able to recruit, and this is just receivers, right? So there are so many other ones within the other position groups that allow for more personalized recruiting. So if you want specific players for your offense, this is going to allow you to get exactly those type of players that you're looking for. Formation subs is such a big win. It's going to help control wear and tear naturally, and it'll allow you to have better personnel to match the formation you're in before the season starts. So if you have a power back that you want to use in your heavier sets, but you have a different running back that you want to use in your more spread out formations, you can just go in preseason and not have to worry about it. So you don't have to, constantly shift the right stick to get to the sub halfback in terms of, when you're on your formations page. This is just going to allow you to do a much better job of preseason, making sure that everybody that you want out there in that specific formation is out there. And you can do it with positions across the board. If you want to just slide a 6th offensive lineman in there for, one of your offensive linemen that doesn't have great toughness for that wear and tear, just on specific formations, you can do so. It's just, again, it's customizable and it allows for a much better roster management and more realism. Having conference customization is also a lot of fun. You're protected up to 2 opponents, which is something that you didn't have previously in College Football 25. This just allows for more customization, like I mentioned. So that's a big plus as well. Scheduling, so every known schedule out to 2040 is in the game. You'll still be able to change your out-of-conference schedule if you want, but if you're looking for realism for games that are already on the board, they'll have them in there for you because that's something that I was looking for in 25. I don't know if I'm going to be looking for it in 26, but I appreciate that they have it in there. Quality of life, you'll be able to see player stats and award screens, which is something that I was really confused why we weren't able to in College Football 25. And then another one that was so huge in NCAA 14 that they didn't have in 25 was being able to see team schedules in the top 25 or the conference standing screens. This just melted my brain when trying to figure out tiebreakers when I got down, into the ends of the season and it was a neck and neck race for the conference title. This is going to make things much easier in terms of trying to figure out common opponent and whether or not, I am in the running to be the representative for my conference or I have some work to do. The members tab in Online Dynasty is going to be huge. Having to go all the way to the right settings screen and then go down the members tab there was just a little pain in the butt that we no longer have to deal with because you'll be able to see everything in a specified members tab. So that's just going to be a nice quality of life thing. And then some other miscellaneous things that I think are going to be super important and fun for us as players, but not necessarily something that are going to have to affect the way that you play. The dynamic time of day. So if you start a game at 3:30, by the end of the game, it will be nighttime, especially if you're later in the season. I think that was something that they wanted to add last year. They just didn't have the time. Now they have it in there, and I think it's going to allow for a lot more immersiveness in those games. Super Sim is tempo adjusted. So if you are a higher tempo team, that will be affected in your Super Sim, which I think is something that we were lacking, and it didn't really have true to sim stats when you were just doing sim dynasties or when you wanted to compare yourself to computer offenses and defenses. Broken records notifications are going to be a lot of fun because you would be like, hey, I wonder if I broke a record. You'd have to go all the way to the record screen and you have to scroll all the way down to wherever your team was and try and find if you broke the record. Having this notification, again, is just a quality of life thing that I think is going to be something that we look back on and be like, why wasn't this in there initially? It just adds to the immersiveness and the overall connection you feel with your dynasty. You can sim to any week, so you don't have to just sim to the first CFP poll. This is something that they had in NCAA 14 that was a lifesaver. You could do the season in chunks of 4 weeks, and it made things so easy when you're trying to do certain videos and keep track of how your team is playing. Now we have that back in College Football 26. I think, again, quality of life, it's just a massive, massive upgrade to what we previously had. That is all I have for you guys today. Make sure to hit that subscribe button on your way out. Thank you guys so much for watching. Hope you enjoyed. Catch you on the flip. See ya.